subjects, and welcome to the final part of our little series where we're going to wrap up our texture. So, first and foremost, let's talk about material layering and what it actually is. So material layering is the idea of blending material properties actually on your whole material. So in Substance Designer, you're probably already familiar with, I assume you already know the basics if you've gotten this far. You probably already know about the view modes. The idea of you can click the 1 key to grab individual inputs. You can click 2 to still have it look like a bunch of individual inputs, but be able to grab an entire group. So this thing that's black boxed, if you look at all the pins that are in a little black box, those are all one group, in this case materials, and if I go up here and I am in material mode, I can actually grab the entire material. And finally, there is compact material, which is my personal favorite, which is just a little green dot for the entire group. This really helps things look compact. And as you can see, all these are just one big kerfuffle. So when you're actually controlling this, you can hold down left shift and drag to disconnect a whole group of connected inputs and redirect them somewhere else. We'll be using this a lot to shuffle around our various connections. And one of the other things we're going to be using is this material setup. So there are a variety of material nodes, for example, material adjustment, material blend, material color blend, mesh data, and so on. Like, there's all kinds of cool stuff. Switches for switching between different materials. There are all kinds of neat little things. And you can see all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. Anyway, so with this, we're going to be using a couple of nodes. First one I want to introduce you to, because it's relatively simple, is Material Blend. This will take two materials, like if I threw down another base material here, and will allow me to blend between them based on a mask. Honestly, with this, you can get into the world of material blending quite easily. And this is honestly the workflow you would probably build out to, like, using, if you just wanted to build a material that was, if you just wanted to build a material pipeline and have a big library of materials, this would be the way to do it. So anyway, I'm going to go in here, however, and you can see there's a bunch of channels that are shown. If we go to our material blend, you can see we can toggle on what channels we want, and by default it has a bunch of ones we also don't want. It has diffuse, it has specular. We're using kind of a base color metallic model right now, so just enable the ones you want and disable the ones you don't. And you can see here, we've now got a variety of connections. I'm just going to make the connections again so that we've got them. And now, there's a really cool thing you can do. I can hold down left shift and drag this. Now you'll notice I also snagged the material here. Luckily, Substance Designer is clever and realizes what you're trying to do, and you'll see it automatically redirects it how I want. And you can see, now we are blending between the two materials. Right now it's just defaulting to our little material up here, which I could easily, I don't know, let's make it kind of a dirt color just for showcase purposes. Make it kind of a dirt color. Let's make it not metal. And let's make it very, very rough. So extremely rough, very grungy. And here's our basic dirt, right? And yeah, we'll start with this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find some mask for it. So I could, for example, throw down dirt. And if I just plug this into our grayscale mask, you'll be able to see, ooh, look, we just built up dirt all over the surface of our mesh, or our texture here. Now you can see a couple of problems right away. I'm using parallax, so you can see it's also damaging the living crap out of the height. The way you avoid this, of course, is going into your various properties here, and you'd say height, and say, you know what, I don't want to have any opacity in the height. So now, as you can see, it affects the other material channels without this one. Another one to keep an eye on is metallic and ambient occlusion, which, again, are worth looking at, because in this case I actually want to keep my ambient occlusion. You can also adjust how they're blended together. For example, multiply, which is generally the way I go. If I look at my ambient occlusion map, you can actually see the difference in here. If I select it and go normal, you can see we get all these white spots in the crevices where it's showing the dirt's ambient occlusion. The dirt's ambient occlusion is just white. But where it's showing that, it's essentially removing that lovely ambient occlusion we built. So we can either fade it out to get that back, or we can switch to multiply, where it'll actually multiply them together. Not subtract. Multiply. There. Now currently they're about the same, but if we were to add ambient occlusion to this, it would actually show up, and they would kind of combine nicely. There's all kinds of cool stuff we can do in this regard to create awesome little details to our materials. Obviously we can build up our layers of materials and we can come up with clever masks, but this is how you would blend multiple materials together. And obviously, as I made my dirt material better and better and better, it would reflect on all of my material blending. This is generally the way to go, and this will get you quite far. However, sometimes you just feel like whipping up a texture really quickly and you don't necessarily feel like making a bunch of individual materials. So one of the things that you might use is the material adjustment layer. This one's kind of cool for stuff like wetness, and there's also material color blend. Both of these do very similar things, though subtly different. So material adjustment will do things like darken your image and increase the contrast of certain channels. For example, I can go in here, and you can see base color, we've got contrast, hue, saturation. They are modifications to something that already exists. Whereas color blend will blend in a color that you want. So in this case, it will blend it towards white. Both of them can be used to push a color around, but I've generally found base color is easier to say, you know what, I'm blending this kind of brownish dirt over this, over the top of this. I want it to be more rough, and I want it to be, a little bit more brown, and I want it to be more of this. It's easier to kind of control on a per channel basis than on material adjustment, but material adjustment has the advantage of always being relative to whatever you're putting in. So if you just want something to be, I want this to be darker, you'd use material adjustment. They're both pretty straightforward, and they both kind of do similar things. And both of them, sadly, have weird default setups in terms of, not being set up convincingly. I do wish there was a way to, set up your defaults for a node and then just save it. There might be. Oh wow, I'm an idiot. There literally is a load preset file. Okay, never mind, I'm an idiot. That is a feature that I was not aware of, and yeah, it's one thing I will mention about Substance Designer is that they have all these tiny icons that they hide stuff under, and it's such a tiny thing. I like that I misclicked on that. So anyway, there we are. See, it just contradicts me immediately. It's like, dumbass, you can do that. So anyway, apparently you can. But yeah, the default's not super amazing. So, as a result, I'm just going to check the channels that I want. And again, you kind of have to be careful with what you're blending in. This will take a little bit of practice, but these can be often quicker than building a whole new material, and a little bit cleaner since they're only a single node. In our case here, I am actually going to go the proper, correct way and be blending in new materials every single time. This also helps us be a little bit more modular, with allowing us to actually have a material for dirt, for example, that we then reuse. So let's start off and let's lay down our dirt material because we know we're going to need that. So again, same setup, just kind of a dark, brownish, highly rough, highly grungy, I don't know, thing. There we are. And user defined maps, we're probably going to want some height information. I'm also going to right click and view in 3D view. That is a total thing you can do. It looks awesome. So let's see if I can remember which one I liked to use. Oh, I'm trying to remember which one looked really good as a dirt. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. B&W Spots looks really good as a dirt. So let's see, B&W Spots 3 maybe? What does this look like? It's dirt. Less awesome. Still pretty awesome, but less awesome. So again, it's just a matter of playing with these maps. So I personally like B&W Spots 2. Because I use it in this configuration so often, I am going to... I'm going to up the disorder a little bit. because as far as I can tell, it's just randomization. I'm sure it has a much more interesting task, but I don't remember it. Anyway, I'm just going to change the random seed a bit, so it's a little bit more randomized. There we are. There's our glorious, bumpy dirt. And, yeah. I'm just going to go to height and up the height range. Not for any real reason, just because good practice. And there we are. Now, material blend. There's also multi-material blend in there, which allows you to blend in a bunch of different materials based on a color mask, which is kind of cool. In this case, we're going to be blending in 2 materials because we want to be able to control the intensity a little bit more precisely. So again, we're going to kind of set this up how we want. So I'm going to say what channels I want. In this case, I don't want any of these other than my 6 basic maps: base color, normal, roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion, and height. And a couple things I'm going to do just for shits and or giggles is I'm going to go under height, which I don't want to modify, and I'm going to just set it to the opacity of 0. And then I'm just going to stick this up here, and I'm just going to copy and paste it for ease of use, because it's just kind of easy to copy and paste something that already has the settings that you like. Obviously I could do load preset and so on, which would be relatively straightforward, but I'm far too lazy for that right now to explore that new feature. So there we are. Let's expose this and let's preview this material because I was previewing the other one. So you can see here, our height has remained the same. I can still see the brick shape under there, but everything else is blending over it, which is exactly what we want. I wonder, does normal have a combine mode? No, it does not. Sad face. Anyway, I am just going to go in here and select some form of image. So we want to blend in dirt, right? Well, let's not, first and foremost, let's not just get in here and say, oh, well, I'm just going to throw on whatever the hell. You know, I'm just going to throw on some random noise map, because it's not just about throwing in some random noise map. We need to look at our reference over here and think for a bit. If we look at our dirt, and you can see it's kind of, if we look at our reference here, there's dirt on it, it's kind of built up in the crevices, it's kind of got these little patterns, swishy patterns in it. It's got like little bits here and there, but it's mostly clustered in the crevices and the kind of occluded areas. So what I might do, for example, is a non-uniform blur, which is basically like a blur that has varying how much it's blurring based on what area you're looking at. I'm going to start with ambient occlusion because ambient occlusion is all the crevices. And then I'm going to blur it based on something else. Let's just say B&W spots. I don't know, that might work. Ooh, that looks nice. Now, one of the problems that I immediately see is that we don't have much contrast in here. So, one thing I might try is the auto levels node. Auto levels will try to push all your darks down so that they are completely dark, and it'll try to push all your whites up so that they're completely white. Basically making sure it's using the whole color range, as in from one end of the histogram to completely the other. The quality setting on this is basically whether or not it's going to do some fancy filtering to get rid of banding. If you see a lot of banding in your resulting image, if you're stretching like a very low contrast image to a very high contrast image, you might see some banding on that. So that's what quality level high will do. Costs a little bit more performance, but can be faster, or can produce better results. Now in this case, I kind of want to push the dark levels up quite a bit more than the minimum, so just kind of building up where I want the dirt. Building up where I want the dirt to be. You can see it right about here. So this looks all nice. And I'm just going to play with this setting until I get something that I like. So that's kind of cool looking. I like that. You know, play with my levels until I got something that I liked, dirt-wise. And now I'm going to just search for something that looks vaguely like dirt so that I can add some patterning to it. Because if we look over here, you'll notice dirt isn't everywhere, it's only in certain areas, and it kind of has a pattern to it. Now, I've got a big library of grunge maps that I will probably be drawing on. These are not anything custom that I've made. They're actually downloaded off of a lovely website that you should totally check out by the name of Substance Share. Share.algorithmic.com. This is a lovely website where you can download all kinds of cool substances and everything for your various perusal, and one of the things they've got, if I go to Images and Grunge, you will see we have a lovely library of grunge maps, including an entire library which you can download by Algorithmic themselves, the Grunge Collection. And you can just download this real quick, and it's a bunch of images, and they're images, so they won't cost much performance. They're also not super randomizable, though, so be careful in that regard. But you can just drag them in. They're images, they're nicely high resolution, and they can be randomized if you want, and they've got various settings to make them more customizable. In this case, I'm just going to drag in this one, make it a little bit darker, just in the color balance there, and then I'm just going to blend these together. First, I need to invert this, so I'm just going to go into the Levels node and drag around basically what it considers white and black, so that those are inverted. Because of course we're saying the bright areas is where we want dirt, and the dark areas are where we don't want dirt. So then I'm just going to blend our lovely little grunge map together, and I'm just going to multiply. And you can see we've got ourselves a lovely dirt map. Look at that. That's exactly where I want my dirt map to be. So I'll be a little bit more generous with it so that it shows up a little bit more. And there we are. Take this, plug it in, and poof! Look at that. Look how amazing that looks. We can play with it a little bit more to adjust the intensity and really dial this in so it looks really good. But you can see how much this anchors our bricks already. And notice it's just because we've thought about it a little bit. We've carefully considered what we're doing. We're not adding some random noise, we're adding like literal detail to the surface. Now that's not to say that adding detail across the entire surface is not a good idea. There are plenty of times where we'll want to do that. Matter of fact, we're going to in a second. But it's important to know what you're doing and think about what you're doing as you're doing it. So, next step, I'm going to go a little bit quicker on this one. We're going to build up, I'm going to actually use a material color blend for this, because I want to show how to use it. So I'm just going to grab this, drag it over here, and I'm just going to drag this up here. Now, material color blend, sadly, I have to set up there's a lot of stuff that I generally set up on this, so don't get too bored of the settings fighting here. Just the default settings for this suck, which means I'm going to learn how to use this preset feature, and then I'm going to report in how to use it in all of its amazingness. So I'm just going to disable all the ones that I don't want. Standard stuff, ambient occlusion, I want, and don't want any of this stuff. Then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to turn all the opacities of everything to 0. In normal, by the way, there's a really cool thing you can do where you can actually have it add normal map information based on either the original height or the mask. I prefer mask because it actually will take whatever pattern you fed it and allow you to push that into the surface or pull it out of the surface, and it's really cool. So I'm just going to, I generally have a tendency to push in more than push out, so I'll set that up, and I'll set the opacity to 0. Reason being, that way I can actually very easily say, okay, how much of each thing I want. Now roughness, of course, to 0, or at least opacity to 0. And for metallic, I definitely want to turn that off, because otherwise it'll end up making everything look non-metallic, and when you try to add a metal, it'll look super weird. Ambient occlusion, you'll end up destroying your ambient occlusion information if you leave this on, so opacity of 0, and height will completely fuck up your height information. Same thing. So once we've got everything set up this way, everything transparent, basically this node will do nothing in its default state, we can just redirect a little bit. I'm going to grab my ambient occlusion and plug it in. And plug that in. And now we have a lovely place to start building our modification. In this case, I want to add a little bit more depth, because if we look over here at our reference, you can see there are all these little bits of damage, there's like little color discolorations and whatnot, and I kind of want to add a little bit of that to our brick. Once again, grunge maps to the rescue, and we can obviously use built-in maps for this as well. For example, I might use fractal noise is a good one. Fractal sum, rather. I'm going to use fractal sum 2 because that's my personal favorite. And then if you want to do similar things to what a lot of the nodes have, histogram scan is your friend. lets you kind of choose where you want it and what contrast you want it at. So I'm just going to plug this in, and now we can start dialing in effects. So we've got this mask, and now we can say, oh, well, I want this area to be slightly brighter, and if I wait for this to update, you can see we get this sort of white splash over our surface. It looks almost like it got whitewashed by something. You know, sort of like it's just been stained by time. It's kind of cool, actually. We can, of course, change our blend mode, including we can make them relative, like add and subtract, which is actually kind of awesome. This allows us to basically do the kind of adjustment layer stuff in the color. For height intensity, I don't feel like causing a huge amount of damage here, maybe a little bit. I'll dial it up just so you can see what it does. So notice we've plugged in this pattern that we're using, and we can now punch this into the normal map, so we've got it in the lighting. I want to make this very subtle. It's important not to be too noisy, because that can cause aliasing in your game, and it's not super recommended. So, yeah, I don't know, that might be a thing to worry about. It can cause aliasing, especially with shiny objects. So, in this case, this isn't really a shiny object, so I'm not really worrying about it. And again, if you're not really working in a game engine, really won't matter. Roughness, I might say, okay, I want you to be smoother, and so on. And we can dial in, like, okay, I want this to be smoother in the area that got whitewashed. But since we're adding a little bit of bumpiness, I'm actually going to up the roughness, because we're actually adding like little bits of bumps to the surface. So, just for logic's sake, I'm going to say it's a little bit bumpier there. And you can already see our materials coming together, and you just keep adding layers like this. So I'm going to now start kicking it up into higher gear. So, metallic, ambient occlusion, don't care about any of these. And now we can start, I'm just going to hit D on the keyboard to dock those. And now we can start speeding it up quite a lot. So, redirect here. I hate that it doesn't redirect the ambient occlusion automatically. I don't understand why it's not, but it is not doing that. And it makes me very, very sad. So anyway, I'm just going to dig through the grunge maps I've downloaded here, find a new one, make it really faint by lowering the balance here, because I only want to add, like, I don't want to modify our base material too much, because I actually want most of my control to be down there. So, plug this in. In this case, I'm going to look over at my reference, and I can see there are kind of these little, I want to say, sort of, I don't know, they're weird. They're like color offsets. They're like little splashes of a certain color. So I'm just going to say that we kind of have this splash of color on our surface. So you can see this sort of this orange splash that we're getting. Keep it subtle, but can add a little bit of depth to your surface and just a little bit of interest. You can see in certain areas, like over here, it helps kind of make the surface look like it's actually breathing and like it's actually made of different materials that have been kind of mashed together and so on. Might actually up my contrast a little bit too. Let's see what that looks like. A little bit too much. Little bit's fine, but not too much. Play it subtle. So there we are. Do we want to have any roughness differences? I might make this a little bit smoother. For the sake of it, I don't feel like doing any normal map information, because it's just kind of a color change. But we'll add a little bit of roughness information, because that stuff can add up. And there we are. And you can keep kind of layering this stuff on, and each time I'm doing it deliberately. And that's kind of the thing to keep in mind, is that it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be random. It shouldn't be something that you do haphazardly. It should be something that you do deliberately and with purpose. And you can see here, once I actually start layering on these materials, we don't even need parallax to make it look like a really good material, because we're starting to get that layering. And in this case, I would just keep layering it on until I had something that really held up, kind of held its own. This currently, I don't think really does. I mean, sure, it might pass. This would be kind of a production-ready asset, but kind of basic. We can do better. You can look at all these white crevices and like this sort of mortar-y look. If we look at the sort of worn areas, there's all kinds of little details we could add to this. For example, these bricks are very uniform and clean. I kind of feel like adding those kind of white chipped areas. So let's actually go in, let's add those white chipped areas. So personally, I like using clouds for my deeper crevice damage, and I also happen to like to use these sort of, let's see, I kind of want to use a grunge map of some description to kind of break it up a little bit, but, so I'm going to just pick a grunge map that looks kind of cool. Ugh, come on, Windows, stop with the thumbnailing, the little tooltip thing. It's going to do the tooltip, shit. Anyway, sorry, just forever fighting Windows. And, so anyway, I'm just going to use histogram scan because that's my forever abused node. Let's grab the areas that we want to be sort of creviced. And then I'm going to blend them together using the gloriousness of a grunge map. Using multiplication, because multiplication is great. Math, kids. Get it. Catch it. Infect yourself with it. Mwahahaha, etc. Because texturing is amazing, and sometimes mathematics is used in texturing. I know. Horrible spoiler. Your life is ruined. But, yeah. There we are. Plug that in. And now let's do our glorious thing. So, here we've got our pattern that we want to kind of indent into the surface. And I'm not actually a fan of I want this pattern to be a little bit more sporadic than that clouds image is making it. So, actually, I can do clouds. I can histogram scan it. And then I can do like a directional warp on it because I feel like it needs it. So let's do a directional warp based on clouds itself, maybe? 32? Nah, that's not working. So let's do it on something else, like maybe clouds 1. Or maybe we should do it the other way around, like have clouds 1 in here, and then clouds 2 over here. Okay, that looks a lot better. So, yeah, that looks significantly better. So we get these kind of little striations, I suppose. I don't know, maybe. You know, I kind of like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so once you've played around, you found a pattern that you like. We're going to go in, and we can now use this pattern to add some detail, as you would expect. So I'm going to add those kind of whitewashed areas. So let's go in here. I actually want to make this a little bit higher contrast, for the sake of it. Let's go in here to histogram scan, higher contrast, darker, and there we are. Okay, a little bit rarer, a little bit higher contrast, we're good. So anyway, I'm going to inject a large swath of white in there. I want these to kind of look like indentations in the surface to a certain degree, so big normal map impact, so as you can see, big chunk in the surface. Maybe not quite so high contrast now that I actually look at it, because I actually want this to be like kind of a gradient that punches in. That'd be kind of cool. So, there we are. Ooh, that's looking nice. I like that. So anyway, generating my nice little pattern grunge here. You can see I can add like a little imperfection to the surface. A little bit, looks like kind of it's been broken and kind of acid washed or something like that. So, I can go in here, I can kind of punch in the normal map detail, and then I can go in here to roughness, and because it's going to be a very rough area, this place has been acid washed in various ways, I'm just going to brush in quite a bit of roughness. So, there we are. There's some gorgeousness, and obviously I just keep layering this on, and I keep playing with it, and I keep choosing effects that I liked. And one of the cool parts about working with material layering, namely like we showed at the beginning, is that you can kind of keep building up a library. You might have a dirt material that you keep working on and trying to have, like, even if it's not going to be a standalone dirt material, this would be like the dirt that you blend in over the top of other things. So it has some variation, it has some color variation, it looks good when it's overlaid over other surfaces. And you can see how much detail we can just punch in quite easily by blending in these different materials and getting all these different details in. Hopefully this has been informative, and again, we can just keep layering this, and maybe I'll do a video where I actually take this material to full completion. But I think for now, I need to sleep because I have work in the morning. So, peace out. Cthulhu Ftaken! And make awesome materials. Goodbye.